Hello and welcome to the Broken Orbital MMA podcast. My name is Jack. I'm your host. Today's podcast is going to be UFC London, Volkov versus Aspinall pre-drinks. We're going to be previewing and predicting the entirety of the UFC London card that's coming up this weekend. I'll also be giving you my best bets, my top 3 bets as well for the night at the end. We went 3-0 in the bets last time out in the Ankalaev versus Santos card. Sorry, I forgot about that. So yeah, if you enjoy this, then please let me know. Interact with it. Tweet and follow and like and share and all of that, all those good things. You can get us on Twitter at BrokenOrbital_ on Instagram and TikTok at BrokenOrbital MMA. You can listen to this podcast on any of your preferred podcast providers. Just search up Broken Orbital. There's an issue with the last one going on Spotify, so I'm not sure what happened there, but hopefully we can amend that very quickly. I don't want to keep you waiting, so I hope you enjoy. And I'm gonna change the order up as well. We're gonna go from bottom to top as opposed to top to bottom this card because I want to talk about some of these prelims. Don't know why some of these prelims are down here, but they are. Let's get into it. Let's talk about this card. Okay, then on to the first fight of the night. We have got Muhammad Mokaev making his UFC debut in the flyweight division versus Cody Durden. Muhammad Mokaev is someone who is very familiar to not just MMA fans in the UK like myself, but across the globe. I mean, you don't just accumulate a 22-0 amateur career, as a teenager without people taking notice. Another IMMAF alumni as well. So yeah, the guy is very familiar to us all. We all know about him. He's a 6-time national wrestling champion as well. And albeit, in the UK, it's not really as illustrious, I suppose, a title as if it was somewhere else. But it's still worth noting and still worth taking, still worth taking a note of. But yeah, he's turned pro now. He's been fighting professionally for a couple of years. I think he's only like 5-0 and with one no contest. But he took out Blaine O'Driscoll in his last fight, a top Irish prospect. So yeah, Muhammad Mokaev is moving now and he's in the UFC. I did come a little bit sooner than I expected, but listen, I think he was somebody the UFC were obviously desperate to snap up. And he's taking on Cody Durden here, who's a good fighter in his own right. He's a good wrestler, and I don't think he's somebody that we shouldn't be kind of jumping right over him. Took out Keeling Iori in his last fight, so that's a good win for him there. Lost to Jimmy Flick, I think before that he had like flying triangle choke or something mad like that. I think that was the end of not last year, but the year before, into 2020. Either way, yeah, he's a good fighter. He done well in the kind of regional circuit. Got some good wins out there. I think he lost to like Jared Scoggins or something as well, which is it's quite something. But yeah, as I said, he's a good wrestler in his own right, and I think he's gonna try and take this fight to Mokaev. And don't get me wrong, I really think there's a lot of room for success for Cody Durden in this one. I think he's going to have success with his wrestling. I think he's going to put the pressure on him, and I think he might even get Mokaev down. He might even be able to get on top and find himself in good positions. I like his kicks, but I think overall, I just like Mokaev's defense a lot more. And I just think the big factor for me is going to be the cardio in this one. I think Mokaev, he might lose the first round, but I think he's just going to keep pushing. Durden's going to slow down, I think. I think he's going to be working hard. He's either going to be working to get him down really hard, or he's going to be working to defend the takedowns really hard. And I guess my only real concern for Mokaev is his camp out in Bahrain. I'm just not convinced that he's got a real camp out there. But overall, I just think Durden's probably going to gas out. I think whether he might take the first round, but whether he's trying to take Mokaev down or whether he's defending takedowns himself, he's just going to be, using a lot of energy, and I do expect him to kind of fade as the fight goes on. And I think Mokaev in that second round, in that third round, will take over, and I'll see he wins a decision in London. So yeah, I'm going to go with Muhammad Mokaev to run out as the victor on his UFC debut. Right, okay, moving swiftly on, we've got Corey Poppins McKenna. She's taking on Elise Reed, and I'm a little surprised at the line for this one. The fact that Elise Reed's a 2-1 underdog is definitely a surprise to me. I don't think she should be anywhere near such a... This line should not be so wide. I like Corey McKenna. Obviously, she's really young. She's like 22, I think. So she's super young. She's been out in America training with Team Alpha Male and things, so she's got a good camp there. And we've seen what she can do. She's a good grappler. She's very good on top when she gets the fight down there. We've seen that in our fight with Kay Hansen. You know, she's had a little bit of issue with injuries, and that is something that maybe worries me. But at the same time, she did such a long layoff, so she could be vastly improved. But I think a big, huge concern for me about Corey McKenna is her striking defence. It was frankly abysmal against Kay Hansen, you know, and I don't think Kay Hansen is the greatest of strikers. You know, you've seen the way that Jazz Davicius defeated Kay Hansen. Well, Elise Reed defeated her, you know, so I know that MMA math doesn't work, but it's worth noting, I think. As for Elise Reed, I mean, the chips were stacked against her in her UFC debut. You know, she was up a weight class against Sijara Eubanks on short notice. I mean, she had no business being in there with Eubanks. Bearing in mind, Eubanks was someone who, you know, was meant to be fighting for the world title at one point, right? And she's so physically strong. She's so domineering. She just shouldn't have been in there with Eubanks, you know, for a girl who's had like, 5 pro fights. So I think for Elise Reed, definitely a path to victory in this one. I think, you know, Corey McKenna did struggle in the clinch a little with Kay Hansen, and I think someone like Elise Reed, I think she's a black belt in Taekwondo. I think she's going to be good on the feet. I think she will be better in those clinch positions. I am really struggling as to where to go with this one, because I can definitely see Elise Reed having a lot of success on the feet in this fight. And I can maybe see Corey McKenna starting to struggle to get it to the ground. I think in the end, I'm going to see Corey McKenna gets it to the ground and wins rounds, if not stopping it. But yeah, 2-1 underdog in Elise Reed. I really don't think that's, you know, I don't think that's a justifiable line. I really think that, yeah, Corey McKenna's way too big a favourite here. I like Elise Reed a lot in this one. I think it's going to be really close, but I'm going to just ever so slightly side with McKenna to get the job done. Right then, on to the next one, and what a travesty that this is so far down the card. We've got Jack the Tank Shore taking on Timur Valiev, and Jack Shore again, someone that I've been very familiar with from his Cage Warriors days. You know, he won the world title, or the Cage Warriors title back then on the bantamweight tournament, of course. And yeah, back then you could see, or at least I thought that, you know, yeah, okay, we've got a guy here who is future UFC championship material, and I still believe that to this day. You know, he's come into the UFC and he's got flying. You know, he's 1-4 now. Yeah, he's really moving, and he's taking on a guy in Timur Valiev who is definitely a really good test for him. Don't get me wrong, Jack Shore's fought good opponents, but this is his biggest test to date. Valiev, someone who, you know, I think he was in PFL as well, wasn't he, for a bit, which was weird. You know, he was obviously, of course, in World Series of Fighting as well. Before then, he transitioned over, and someone who I was a little surprised it took them all this long to kind of get into the UFC. But you know, he's here and he's a very good fighter. You know, the only outstanding loss on his MMA record was his very first fight, so that tells you a lot about Timur Valiev now. He did no contest with Trevin Jones in his UFC debut, and then he fought Martin Day last year, and now he's fighting against, then he fought against Haloni Barcelos in a decision that he probably shouldn't have gotten, if we're being honest, in the Gan Volkov card. This will be his third fight as well in a row, in which he's on a card headlined by Alexander Volkov. So he obviously loves sharing a card with Volkov. Maybe that's going to give him good luck. But yeah, I mean, Jack Shore, he draws comparisons to Georges St. Pierre, and whether it's totally justified or not, and I mean, I understand it. You've got to be pretty good if you're getting compared to GSP, right? You know, the way that his patience in the grappling, and the way that he controls you when you're down, and the way that he, you know, his patience that he shows when looking for a submission. He's one of those guys who's like wise beyond his years, and you know, the discipline that he shows is really exceptional. This is going to be a tough fight for him. As I said, you know, Valiev is a good wrestler in his own right. You know, I think maybe even Valiev might end up on top at times in this fight. I think perhaps we could see that. Maybe Jack Shore shoots and Valiev ends up on top. I could see Jack Shore maybe getting into some difficult positions. We've not really seen him in any in his career so far in the UFC. Could see maybe Timur Valiev doing that. However, I just think that at the end of the day, I don't know if Valiev's going to have the same cardio. I think the difference, though, for me is going to be the striking here. And Jack Shore's last couple of fights, you know, last year. But yeah, I mean, Jack Shore, he draws comparisons to Georges St. Pierre, and whether it's totally justified or not, and I mean, I understand it. You've got to be pretty good if you're getting compared to GSP, right? You know, the way that his patience in the grappling, and the way that he controls you when you're down, and the way that he, you know, his patience that he shows when looking for a submission. He's one of those guys who's like wise beyond his years, and The discipline that he shows is really exceptional. This is going to be a tough fight for him. As I said, Valiev is a good wrestler in his own right. I think maybe even Valiev might end up on top at times in this fight. I think perhaps we could see that. Maybe Jack Shore shoots in and Valiev ends up on top. I could see Jack Shore maybe getting into some difficult positions. We've not really seen him in any in his career so far in the UFC. I do fancy him to take advantage of that, get him to the floor. And I'm picking Jack Shore here. I think he has got all the makings of a world champion. I still do. As I said, it'll be a tough fight for him. I expect him to get put in some difficult positions, but I think he's going to overcome them, and I think he's going to win the fight. Whether it's by decision or maybe a late submission, I'm not sure. But I'm definitely going to ride with Jack Shore here to get the job done. Okay, next up, and another fight, which, how is this not on the main card? I have no idea. It should be, but we've got Nikita the Miner Krylov. He's taking on Paul the Bear Jew Craig. And top 10 light heavyweights going at it. This should be on the main card. Why is it not? And Paul Craig is someone who has been pretty disrespected. Let's be real. With his ranking number 10. Jamal Hill, listen, got a great knockout over Johnny Walker. Great prospect, but Paul Craig beat him 6 months ago? Maybe just over that. Under a year anyway. How is Jamal Hill now ranked ahead of Paul Craig? What's Paul Craig done to lose that ranking? Nothing. He had a fight with Gustafsson that fell through last year, so it's not really his fault. But whatever, I digress. This is a great fight, and this is a really fun one. And as somebody who, obviously, I'm Scottish, if you could figure that one out. This is one that means a lot to me as a fan. Paul Craig is Scotland's best chance right now of becoming a UFC champion, alongside Casey O'Neill, but Casey's still got a while to go. Paul Craig is very much, he's grounded enough and wise enough to know that, he's 34. He's saying it himself, this is it, this is his title run, He kind of postponed his retirement plans because he does feel like he can make one run at this title. He's not really got time on his side. And he says himself, if he loses this fight, then where do you go? You're kind of back to square one, and then he would be considering retirement. So we want to see him win, or I want to see him win anyway. I'm going to be biased here. I'm not going to be biased in my breakdown though. Let's be real. So we'll start with Nikita Krylov, who's really weird. He's one of those guys as well that in kind of the entire length of the time that I've been an MMA fan, the entire length of the time that I've watched the UFC, Nikita Krylov has kind of came in, and been a fighter here, right at, not at the very beginning of me being an MMA fan, but in 2015, when I've been about an MMA fan for a year or so, Nikita Krylov was, he made his debut and at heavyweight, I'm pretty sure, right? And let's start with Nikita Krylov, and he's a guy who, for the entire length of me being a UFC fan, or an MMA fan, but watching the UFC, of course, he feels like I've kind of seen him, I don't remember his debut. That was slightly before I was a fan, but I remember his fight with OSP, and I remember his fight on the McGregor Brandao card, so about that time. But point is that, and I think that was his light heavyweight debut, wasn't it, OSP, because he came in as a heavyweight. So I feel like I've watched his whole career, and he was really young as well. He was 21, 22, I think, at that time. And he's only 29 just now, which is weird and frightening when you consider, it's been that long he's been here. But he's one of those guys that I think we've all watched grow as a fighter. And, he's had the majority of his career in the UFC, aside from that. What was that? Remember that weird stint a few years ago when he was at Fight Nights Global? That was strange. When he got released, I think he lost to Misha Cirkunov and didn't re-sign. I'm not sure what that was all about. I'm glad he's back, though, because he deserves to be here. But he's a pretty weird one. He's quite volatile. He's really solid all round. He's a great grappler, offensively anyway. He's very good. He's a better wrestler in this fight, that's for sure. He's a better striker in this fight, that's for sure. His hands are good. He's powerful. He's got good submission skills. He went on a run where he was submitting guys left, right, and centre in the UFC before he was submitted himself by Misha Cirkunov, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, this is such a weird fight. He's such a weird fighter in general just because of that. Usually if you're a grappler, you're just a good grappler. If you're a good submission artist, you're just good at submissions. You're good at defending them, you're good at executing them. He's not like that. He's good at submitting folk. He's not so good at stopping getting submitted himself, which is so weird, man. It's just not many fighters are like that. Although he did go the distance with Glover, so fair play to him. But yeah, when you see him on the receiving end of fights, and when he's losing them, he does look quite bad at times. I mean, he's coming off of I lost to Magomed Ankalaev, of course, who we talked about him last week. Before then, won against Johnny Walker. It was a very good, very solid performance, but to be fair, he should be beating a guy like Johnny Walker, to be honest with you. He's better than Johnny Walker. This is a really, really tough fight to call. What I like about Paul Craig is a lot of grapplers, when they come into the UFC, guys who have maybe got through their amateur career and their early pro career, grappling, when they come into the UFC, they start to mix it together. Maybe they get a couple of wins, and then it's like people start asking questions. Hey, well, you can grapple, but can you strike? And a lot of them kind of double down, and they're like, okay, I'm going to show you I can strike, and they get caught up in that. And vice versa, it goes to strikers as well. Maybe not the best example of a pure striker, but I always go back to this example. It's one that I think of, maybe because it hurts me as a Scottish fan, but Stevie Ray, I remember his fight with Alan Patrick, and he was getting taken down and held down for the entirety of the fight. And instead of trying to get back up with his energy, he spent the whole fight on his back chasing submissions that he never got. Now, if Stevie Ray had just put some of that energy into trying to get back to his feet, he might have won the fight, or he might have got back up and won it, right? Paul Craig's not really like that. Maybe he did, at least, not at the moment just now. He's very much a guy who knows his striking's not very good. I think he'd tell you that himself. Where he excels is on the mat. He's arguably the best jiu-jitsu player in this division, I think, with the likes of Glover Teixeira. It's probably him and Paul Craig are the two best grapplers in this division just now. So he knows that, and he plays to his strengths. He's trying to get you on the mat, and he's very good at kind of luring you into positions, luring you into his guard and sneaking you in there. And he's someone who's also proven that, hey, off his back, he's dangerous. The Ankalaev fight, the Ankalaev fight, of course, kind of springs to mind there. And he's done it a couple of times. Jamal Hill, of course, in his last one. So, as I said, he's a guy who's proving that on his back, he's really, really dangerous. And he doesn't mind being on his back because he knows he can submit you, right? So this fight is really interesting because, number one, what version of Nikita Krylov are we going to get? We know that, listen, Nikita Krylov's Ukrainian. There's stuff going on in Ukraine. We all know that. How is he going to be? Paul Craig said it himself at his press conference, he'd like to say that he's a professional and that he's carrying on with his job and he's not thinking about other things, but you can't be so sure, right? This is absolutely, these are exceptional circumstances, right? So we're not entirely too sure how he's going to be. I just don't trust Nikita Krylov enough to, in the past, like, don't get me wrong, you look at the guys he loses to, Ankalaev and Blachowicz and Glover Teixeira and Misha Cirkunov, who's no slouch, maybe not in the same vein as the other three there, but good fighter himself. But yeah, Nikita Krylov, his grappling defense just worries me way too much. He should dictate where the fight takes place, and if he's switched on, and if Nikita Krylov is at his best, he will keep this fight on the feet, and he will win it. For sure. As I said, he's a better wrestler. He might even, choose to offensively grapple Paul Craig. But at the same time, if he does, I think that's a bad move because, as I've said, he can't defend submissions himself. So it's very much a kind of tit for tat. It's you give and take some here in this matchup with all the different variables. If it was on the feet, Krylov's winning this. I do fancy him to maybe take down Paul Craig and get caught with Craig in his guard, or I fancy Paul Craig to maybe take him down himself. And I think that's probably his best strategy here. If Paul Craig can take down Nikita Krylov, his submission defense tells me he's tapping. So I'm going to go with a bear Jew. I think he's either going to get him down himself, he's going to pull him into his guard, or Krylov's going to get him down. Either way, I just think that this fight will hit the mat at some point. I just don't trust Nikita Krylov enough to be able to keep this one standing. And if it does hit the mat, I fancy Paul Craig to get something. I fancy him to catch an arm, catch a neck if it's sitting right there. I think in that Ankalaev fight, Nikita Krylov's neck was pretty exposed, so someone like Paul Craig will snap that up and, they'll have that for their dinner. I'm going to say Paul Craig wins this one and hopefully bringing the UFC back to Glasgow. It sounded like his press conference there, he was saying that they've booked all these venues across the UK, London, Manchester, Liverpool, Glasgow, and it sounds like it depends on the winners of the fights on Saturday as to where they go next. So I'm assuming that they've booked Scotland, hoping Paul Craig gets a win. Or not hoping, but, just in case Paul Craig gets a win and headlines that card. So, yeah, hopefully he can get us an event as well. And maybe Cardiff as well for, the Welsh fans. Jack Shore, why not? They've not had one yet, and that feels a bit rude. So, go on, give the fans what they want in Wales. Okay, I'm going to try and rattle through the next few then. We've got Shamil Abdurakhimov, he's taken on Sergey Pavlovich. Pavlovich is someone I am very familiar with. I was watching him on the come-up in Fight Nights Global. He was somebody I was a big fan of, and definitely part of this new wave, next generation of heavyweights, much like Tom Aspinall, in the sense that he's lighter on the feet, and he moves really well. His boxing's crisp too, and he's got power as well. He's not just a heavyweight who doesn't have the power. Sergey Pavlovich definitely has got the knockout power. I love his hands. I love his hand speed, his boxing skills in general. He's a really talented fighter, and got his UFC debut a few years ago against against Alistair Overeem in China. And lost that one. Probably was just a little bit too green to be taking on a guy like Overeem. Of course, he lost that fight, but since then he's bounced back. He's got back-to-back finishes now, and yeah, he's been out for a little while. He's been out since October 2019. I think it was the Maya Aspirin card in Singapore. So he's got a few years off now, or a couple of years off, and it'll be interesting to see if he's improved. I'm assuming Sergey Pavlovich probably has improved on, improved since his last performance. Of course, Abdurakhimov was meant to be he was the original opponent for Tom Aspinall, of course. So that kind of tells you where he's where he sits in the division. I do maybe worry though about his age. Like, he's lost a couple of fights now, via finish. His last two, of course, to Curtis Blades and then Chris Dawkins. So I'm worried that maybe the chin isn't all there. I think the UFC knew what they were doing when they gave Aspinall that fight. That was kind of meant to be a layup in that one. I'm maybe worried about Pavlovich's gas tank a little if he can't get out here in the first. I think Abdurakhimov, while he is 40, he's still here for a reason, and obviously, he's lost to those two guys, but before then, a couple of years ago now, but beating Arlovsky on points, defeated Marcin Tybura as well, so he's a very good fighter who's still hanging around. I am going to go with Pavlovich to get this done in the first round. I think he's probably going to knock him out, but as I said, if he doesn't finish this in the first, then I'm a little concerned. I think, some people are kind of saying that they don't see much in Pavlovich, and that's fair enough. That's their opinion. I do. I think he's a good fighter. I think he's a top prospect in this division. Maybe I'll be proved wrong. But yeah, if Abdurakhimov can weather this storm, I can see him maybe grinding out a decision or maybe even getting a late finish himself. But I'm going to ride with Pavlovich. I think he gets a knockout in the first round. I wouldn't touch this betting-wise, though. I just don't trust any of them. Feature prelim then, we've got Mike Grundy and Mahwan Amirkhani. Why is this so high up on the card? I don't know. Who done that? That's such a terrible decision. I can't tell if I like this fight or if I hate it. I think these are like two low-level IQ, two poor cardio grapplers. And this could make for a really fun fight, just as we get into the later rounds here. I don't really know what to make of this. I guess I'm going to go Mike Grundy. I just think that he's probably slightly better everywhere. I think he's a better wrestler. I think he's, I think he's got better hands, but like, he's not exactly efficient when it comes to taking people down. I think he went like 3 for 20 in this fight with Lando Venata. So, maybe not the best, but at least he's determined. He's going to keep trying to get the fight down in that one, and obviously he couldn't defeat Movsar Evloev, but Evloev is just really, 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 really good. Win over Nada Romani, though, is a good win for him. So, fair dues to Mike Grundy. I just don't trust Mahwan Amirkhani either. He lost to Kamwela Kirk last year, and he lost to Leroy Murphy, of course, in his last fight. I just don't think Amirkhani's all that. He's a good submission artist, of course, but I can see him getting taken down here at times, and I just think his takedown defense is good enough. So yeah, I expect that will happen, but I think both guys are going to gas pretty heavily, and maybe as the later rounds goes on, this might turn into a striking affair. It might turn into a sloppy grappling affair. I don't really know how this one's going to go. I probably wouldn't touch it betting-wise, but I'm going to go with Mike Grundy here. Okay, on to the main card, and we've got Jai Herbert taking on Ilia Topuria to kick things off. And yeah, I don't know what Jai Herbert done to Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby, but to have to fight Trinaldo, Moicano, and now Topuria, to kind of welcome him to the UFC, that is brutal. Don't know what happened there, but I like Jai Herbert. He's a good fighter. I think obviously we've not had the chance to see the best of him in the UFC yet because he's kind of facing killers, But listen, I think Jai Herbert is a live dog in this fight. I really do. I like him in this one. I'm interested to see weigh-in day, and I'm interested to see the size difference between the two, because Topuria is... Yeah, I like Jai Herbert in this one. I think he's a live dog here. I'm very interested to see them on weigh-in day, because I think Topuria, he's a stocky featherweight, but he's not massive. I think Jai Herbert's a pretty big lightweight though, so I think the weight difference here could be quite big. I think there's an 8-inch reach advantage, a 6-inch height advantage on Jai Herbert's side, and the striking, I don't think Topuria's striking's bad. I like Topuria's striking, but he could definitely keep him on the outside if he can keep him on the end of his jab and stick and move and, circle around and get away from Topuria. There's a route to victory for Jai Herbert in this one. But, Ilia Topuria is he's a top 10 featherweight, he's a guy who's capable of winning the world title. I just think his grappling's going to be too good. I think, his striking is good enough. If he can get on the inside, he can make this a good fight with Herbert. But I do think he's going to probably get the takedown at one point, and, even multiple takedowns. I fancy him to get them as he likes, And yeah, I think Ilia Topuria is probably going to finish this fight on the mat via submission. So my official pick is Topuria by submission, most likely. But I think Jai Herbert, as I said, he's a live dog. I think there's definitely a route to victory for him in this one. I think, his length is going to be really good for him. But I suppose we'll see how the size difference helps him in the in defending the takedown. But I think Topuria is going to get it done. I think he's going to get him down and probably finish him. Right, the meatball, Molly McCann, she's taking on Luana Carolina, and I like Carolina's striking. I think she's a good striker. I think she's pretty powerful. She's pretty heavy-handed. Not really got the finishes on the resume yet to kind of show us. But I like her. I think a win over Lupi Godinez in her last fight, that's a good win for her. She beat Poliana Patelio as well via split decision. So I do like Luana Carolina, but I'm going to go with Molly McCann. I don't think this fight, there's not much between these girls at all, and I don't think you should treat it as if there is. I think if you're getting a good underdog line for Carolina, maybe you take it. But I think Molly McCann, for me, has just proven that she can mix it up, and Luana Carolina hasn't. If anything, she's looked like a fish out of water on the mat. Now, by no means is Molly McCann some black belt jiu-jitsu fighter, She's not a grappler, primarily. These ladies are going to go out there, they're going to slug it out, and they're going to have a great fight. I'm sure of it. I think this is going to be a very exciting one. But I just fancy Molly McCann to mix it up and get the takedowns, and that's going to be the difference. I think keeping her guessing, getting her on the mat, winning some points on the cards, on the mat, and as I said, that's just been a difference maker. She's proven that in her career that she can win. She can get the fight to the ground. So my pick's are Molly McCann. I think she's just going to be able to mix it up too well. I think she'll probably win this one via decision. I'm not like incredibly confident, but I am reasonably confident in this one. I just think, as I said, she'll be able to mix it up, and that's something that Carolina hasn't shown she can do. Right, then we've got Gunnar Nelson making his return after 2.5 years off. He's taking on Takahashi Sato, and I'm going to go with Nelson in this one. Gunnar Nelson's probably way past his prime, or not maybe way past it, but he's probably past his prime. Even in his prime, he was a borderline top 10 guy who could never really get any further, if even that. He's taking on a guy, Takahashi Sato, who he's obviously training out at Sanford MMA. He's training with Henry Hooft, etc. So he's got a really good camp out there, and he's a really powerful guy, right? He's heavy, and he's heavy-handed, and he's knocked out Jason Witt and Caleb E. Saunders. His 2 losses in the UFC as well. He got finished by Bilal Muhammad and Miguel Baeza, who are guys he shouldn't really be in there with, if we're being honest. They're very good fighters. But that's my worry there. They were both by submission, and 3 of his 4 pro losses are by way of submission. If Gunnar Nelson is even just a fraction of his former self, he should be able to win this fight. Don't get me wrong, the power of Sato means this is real, and Gunnar Nelson's layoff could be a problem. I think his movement is good enough. He's got that, he's wide stance, etc. He's quite light on his feet. He likes to bounce a lot. He should be elusive enough to avoid the big strikes and then take this fight to the mat. listen, if Gunnar Nelson starts grappling and if he gets this on the ground, there's no excuses for Gunnar Nelson not winning this fight, not winning the rounds, or better yet, submitting him. So I'm going to go with Gunnar Nelson here. Definitely a route for Sato in this one. It's too hard, or it's hard to be like really extremely confident in this one, but I am relatively confident, just because of his layoff. But yeah, I'm pretty confident in Gunnar Nelson here, getting the submission win. Right then, the featured bout on the main card, we have got Paddy Pimblett. He's taking on Rodrigo Cazula Vargas, of course, as he's better known as Cazula. And the UFC know what they're doing here with Paddy Pimblett. They are giving him a layup. That's maybe a little bit harsh, but Vargas is a good grappler himself. I think he's got a few submission wins. He's also got a couple of knockouts as well, but he is kind of primarily known as a grappler, which is interesting. He beat Rong Zhu in his last fight, who's a good up-and-coming fighter out of China. So, yeah, he's alive. He's about there. I just think Paddy Pimblett is going to be able to... I just think wherever the fight goes here, Paddy Pimblett's better. He's somebody as well who I've seen coming out of Cage Warriors. Paddy Pimblett is someone who could have been in the UFC like 4 or 5 years ago, but he stuck the Cage Warriors and done his growing there. And I say this all the time, but the UFC is not necessarily the best place for a prospect's development. Paddy Pimblett knew that, and he took his losses in Cage Warriors. He lost to the likes of Soren back in there, and he beat the likes of like Julian Erosa, who, look at how that one's aged for him. It's been a tremendous victory. You look at Julian Erosa now; he's just a competent guy on the UFC roster. So, yeah, I think Paddy Pimblett's just better here. I do believe he's going to get the job done. I think wherever this fight goes, he's better. I can see him maybe knocking down Vargas and getting the finish, but I don't think that Pimblett is some sort of... I don't think he's going to be a top 10 guy or anything. So it's very possible that, that Vargas defeats him tonight. I don't think there's going to be a tremendous amount in between them. But I am going to go with Paddy Pimblett to get the job done. I think he'll probably get a finish. I'm riding with Paddy Pimblett here. Okay, on to the co-main event. And we've got Arnold Allen. He's taking on Dan the Hangman Hooker, the real BMF. And in this one, this is a close fight, and I like this one a lot. Allen, to me, is someone who, he doesn't feel like really exceptional anywhere. He's got a very good head on his shoulders. Another guy who's kind of, as I said before, with the likes of Jack Shore. He just seems very wise beyond his years. His IQ is very good. His defense is great. His striking defense in particular is fantastic. And he just kind of knows when to mix it up really well. He knows when to get going, and he understands the triggers for when he needs to pile under pressure or step inside. So I like Arnold Allen a lot in general, and there's a reason that he's been matched up with the likes of Josh Emmett, and of course that never went through. You've seen him in his last fight with Sadiq Youssef as well, of course, and how that one's aged with Youssef's last fight there. I suppose the biggest concern for me is just his inactivity, but that's always been the same. It'll be interesting to see how this one goes as well with Dan Hooker. Again, he's another guy I'm interested to see on the scales. He was a big lightweight, or wasn't a big lightweight. He was a relatively big lightweight. Obviously, he was a big featherweight when he was down there. The fact that he's coming back, I'm not exactly sure if he's going to look too great or not. I'm not exactly 100% sure, but we know what Hooker's going to do. If he can keep this at range, if he can pick him apart, he's going to look good. He's a very underrated grappler as well, but he's also been on the receiving end of a couple of bad knockouts. He's not really looked great since the Poirier fight. Of course, that was an absolute war. He took a ton of damage in that one. And he's been knocked out, of course, since then. He lost the fight to Michael Chandler, of course, on Fight Island in Chandler's debut. He beat Nasser Haqparast, which was a good kind of fight to kind of see where he was at in the division, and then he takes that one on short notice against Islam Makhachev. So, you can't really say all too much there. So yeah, this is a really difficult one. As I said, Allen to me is just someone who, he doesn't really stick out anywhere. He just is super well-rounded. He's definitely going to be the better grappler in this one, but he's just super well-rounded. And if Dan Hooker's coming in, he's flying all the way from New Zealand. He's going to be cutting You know, he's going to be cutting a lot of weight to get down to featherweight, of course. How he's going to look on the scales, I don't know. Whether he even makes the weight, I don't know. I'm not entirely convinced. But if Dan Hooker has a, you know, as I said, is maybe not even necessarily a bad weight cut, but it's going to be difficult for him either way. He might look compromised, his chin as well in that, you know, from that Michael Chandler fight. He may not be at 100% in that fight, just based off his weight cut alone and based off of his last couple of fights and the damage that he's taken and that's accumulated. I think I'm going to side with Arnold Allen here to get the job done. But Dan Hooker's going to be big. He's going to be longer. He's a fantastic Thai boxer. So I think he can really keep Arnold Allen at bay, and I think he can really, you know, he's going to have the power advantage. I fancy him to land a lot of strikes, make this really competitive. And even if he does end up on the mat, he's very good off his back. You know, he's a good submission artist, and he's, you know, okay, he's not the best, but he's better than some people will give him credit for. So, yep, I think a very close one here, but I'm going to side with. So I think a very close one here, but I'm going to ever so slightly side with Arnold Allen. All right, and on to the main event, we have got Alexander Drago Volkov is taking on Tom Aspinall. And I think a lot of us sometimes we kind of roll our eyes when we see these heavyweight main events. I'm really excited for this one personally. I don't know about yous. This is a fight that was, I think one thing to consider as well, this is a fight that was kind of born out of necessity. This wasn't really created because this was the next step for Tom Aspinall. They needed a main event for this card, kind of like Blades versus Dawkins next week, I think it is. Probably not the right fight to make, but they just needed a main event, so they went with that. Of course, they wanted Darren Till and Uriah Hall for this card. That didn't materialise. Tom Aspinall, as we mentioned earlier, he had an opponent in Shamil Abdurakhimov, who was probably the next step in the ladder for Aspinall, and he said himself he was going to take it slow, he was going to take his time. You know, he knows he's still pretty green in this sport, and he was going to climb the ladder, as I said, you know, at the right pace. That's changed. That's been flipped on its head. He's got the big main event spot here against Alexander Volkov. And it's not that I don't think Tom Aspinall is good enough to make this competitive or even win it, because I think he definitely is good enough for both of those. I just think it might be a little too much too soon for him. Volkov is kind of like he's like the gatekeeper to the top five, a gatekeeper to the title shots or for title contendership in the heavyweight division. It feels like everybody's kind of got to go through him, except the champ, which is quite funny. But the likes of Blades, who, you know, I think he's not fought for a title yet, but we feel like he's probably good enough to. Cyril Gane, Derek Lewis, they're the guys that Volkov gets beaten off of, but he kind of beats the rest of the guys. You know, fond memories from his last visit in London as well. So Volkov is a real tough test for him, and he, as I said, he has jumped a peg or two in that ladder in the UFC heavyweight division for sure by skipping over Abdurakhimov and taking this Volkov fight. But for me in this one, you know, Volkov's going to have the length advantage. Of course, he's going to have the height advantage. He's a big guy. He's a very good striker. You know, he's quite, he does, you know, he's not the most athletic. Of course, he's a big boy, and I think that's something that's going to play into Tom Aspinall's hands. You know, obviously he is lighter on the feet. He moves like a middleweight. That's what they all say, right? Cyril Gane made good use of that as well. I think for me, the biggest issue or the biggest question in this fight is going to be the cardio of Aspinall, respectively, because we know Alexander Volkov, he's not really a finisher. You know, as I said, he's a good technical striker. He's also a good offensive wrestler, which is another very interesting dynamic to add to this fight. But I think Sergey Spivak, you know, in his last fight with Aspinall there, he proved that, or Aspinall proved in that one, that he's not just going to, you know, go to the floor because you try and take him there. He's a difficult guy to take down. And I don't think Volkov's a better wrestler than Spivak. He's going to be, you know, maybe bigger physically. That might help him. But yeah, this is going to be difficult. You know, Volkov will keep him on the air. So, you know, Volkov's going to try and keep him at distance, use his long limbs and use his height advantage. You know, he's going to have that in the bag. It's a difficult puzzle for Tom Aspinall to solve. It's a new puzzle for Tom Aspinall to solve. Obviously, I think the power advantage is with Aspinall. And yeah, the cardio is the big question for me. You know, I can maybe see him taking the first round, maybe the second. Volkov's a pretty, I don't know, I think historically he's been a pretty hard guy to put away, but in his last few fights, I do see him kind of buckling at big shots. You know, when he takes a big shot, he gets quite linear. So I'm not entirely sure how this fight goes. I think this is a really difficult one to call I think for me, though, I'm going to go with Tom Aspinall. I think he will have the cardio to hang in there, although I'm not, as I say, I'm not confident about that. I'm just going to guess that he does have the cardio in that spot. I think he's going to land some big shots in the first round or two. Might not get him out of there straight away. Might drop a round as well or two in this one, but I just think that Volkov, the way he's been eating shots lately, I don't think he's been fighting guys with hands like Aspinall who have got the speed, who have got the, obviously Cyril Gane's a good technical fighter, but he wasn't really taking many risks in that Volkov fight. I think Tom Aspinall is going to be, coming towards Volkov. He's going to be trying to, take his head off with the punches, and I think, the damage will accumulate. He might slow down a little bit. I don't think he's going to be looking 100% fit. Maybe that's not the right term. I don't think his cardio is going to be stacking up incredibly well, but I think he should have enough to see him through the rounds, and I do think he'll probably get a finish maybe in that third round, I'll guess, for Tom Aspinall. That's my official prediction. So finally then, just to wrap things up, I'm going to be taking you through my 3 top bets for this card, just singles, no like parlays or anything. Last week we went 3-0 with the best bets, so let's keep up our unbeaten streak. Hopefully we can keep that going. So my first bet then is maybe not this card, there's a lot of good value in underdogs here, definitely, but I'm going to be riding with just my kind of 3 best picks, not the best kind of value, but the likes of Paul Craig, Elise Reed. There's plenty of fighters across this card where you can pick up value for sure. So I think there's a lot of value, as I said, in this one. I think Volkov as well. I said that main event was really close, but my first pick, I'm going to take Jack Shore's money line. Again, I've kind of said in the the preview, I think Shore is gonna definitely, it's gonna be a tough test for him, but I do think his striking is better. I like his IQ better. I think he's gonna end up on top in this fight, and his top pressure is nasty. So I'm gonna pick Jack Shore's money line. I'm getting that at evens, so I think that's a good line for that there. Okay, next up then, I'm gonna go with Gunnar Nelson to win by submission. I'm getting that at 6-5. So bet £5, you get 6 back, including your stake. I think plus money for Gunnar Nelson to win this one by submission. As I said before, Sato's submission defense, he's losing a lot of fights by submission. He's lost 3 of his 4 losses via submission. Gunnar Nelson's grappling ability should not have went anywhere, and as I said, I think he should be elusive enough to avoid that big right hand. Sato's taken this one on short notice. If Gunnar Nelson is even, as I said, fractionally as good as he was before, he should get this fight to the ground, and there's really no excuse for him losing it if he can and gets it to the ground. So I think my second best bet there is going to be Gunnar Nelson by submission. And then my third bet, I'm going to go with the meatball, Molly McCann to win via decision at 13-10. So again, just over evens, plus money on that one. Typically, I would stay away from female fights, and especially of this kind of close nature, but I am reasonably confident in Molly McCann getting the job done here, so I'm actually going to ride there with that. So, at least evens on all of them there. So, at least evens on all of those bets. Hopefully we can, as I said, keep up our unbeaten streak, move to 6-0 for next week's card, which is going to be in, I think it's Columbus, or it's Cincinnati. It's one of the two. So, there you have it, my 3 best bets for this card. Hopefully we can move to 6-0 and keep the unbeaten streak going. At least evens there for all of those as well. So, not too bad at all. Next week's card is in Columbus. So it's Curtis Blades versus Chris Dawkins. We've also got another Scottish person on that card as well. Joanne Wood is back in action. I can't wait to break that card down and talk a bit about that. I hope you've enjoyed listening here, though. I hope to see you next week for the hangover for UFC London. There's going to be a lot of talking points, I'm sure. There's so many great prospects in this card. It's absolutely fantastic. This card's a really big deal in this part of the world. But thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please consider interacting with it. Share this about, on your social medias, etc. Interact with it. Just let me know that you like this and you want to see more. You can get this on YouTube, on Spotify, on, as I said before, Apple, Google, Samsung podcasts, Amazon, everything, right? So go and check it out on YouTube as well, of course, if I didn't mention that. We're on Twitter at @BrokenOrbital_, on TikTok and Instagram at BrokenOrbitalMMA. I've been Jack. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you back here soon.